Hi, I'm Troy from Studio 33 Guitar. Thanks for watching. Today we're looking at how to play Country Roads by John Denver. This is another one of those classic songs that if you play guitar, you really should know how to play this song. And it's not too difficult to play. There are only 4 main chords throughout the verse and the chorus, and then 1 additional chord in the bridge. Now I'll show you those chords, and I'll also show you some simplified versions that I recommend using if you're a beginner. I'll also show you a strumming pattern that you can use for this song and a simplified strum, again, if you're a beginner and you're just starting out. And as always, you can get a free PDF chord chart of this song from my website, studio33guitar.com. If you print that off, it'll make things a lot easier to follow along. And while you're there, you can also check out some of the other chord charts and free lessons that I have, or some of the full courses that I offer. Now, to play along with the recording by John Denver, you will need to have a guitar capo. Now, if you don't have a capo, you can still play this song with the chords that I'm going to show you. It's just going to sound a little bit lower than the original recording, which may actually be handy because if you're singing along, some of the notes in the chorus get a little bit high, so playing it in a lower key is nice for singing. But if you want to get a capo, then you can order one on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below that'll take you directly to the one that I use. So let's zoom in on the neck and have a look at how to play Country Roads. As I mentioned in the intro, you're going to need 4 chords for this song for the verses and the chorus. And those 4 chords are going to be G, D, E minor, and C. Now these ones that I'm showing right now are the easier versions of those chords. If you've learned some of these chords before, for example, if you've learned a C major chord like this, or an E minor chord like this, or like this, then you can use those for this song. But if you want to play simplified versions, those are the chords that I'm going to show you here. So if you're a beginner, this is the way to go. And if you've watched some of my other videos, then you know that I talk about these chords a lot, and I do recommend playing them this way a lot because it is easier, especially if you're a beginner. Let's take a look at the chords for the verse first. So we're going to start with this G chord, and normally when I play a G chord, I'll have these 2 fingers locked in here on the 3rd fret on both the B and E string. And you'll notice that some of the other chords I'm going to show you, those fingers get to stay in that same position, and that's why I recommend that you play it this way, because it reduces the amount of movement that you need to make with your fingers. So if you play a G chord this way with your ring finger down there, you can do that for this song as well, or if you have just your pinky finger down there. Whatever way you play a G chord is fine, but you might want to take a look at the way that I'm showing it here and see if maybe this might be a better way and an easier way, especially if you're a beginner. Now we're going to play this G chord for 2 full bars. So 1 bar means that we're counting to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we're playing 2 bars, then that means we're going to count to 4 twice. Now I'll show you the actual strumming pattern after we look at the chords, but we'll just run through all the chords first. But just know that you're going to be playing this G chord for 2 full bars before we move to the next chord. And the next chord that we're going to is an E minor chord. Now I typically would play this version, which is an E minor 7. Now the advantage of this one is that these 2 fingers up here that we had for this G chord stay in that exact same spot. And in fact, this index finger stays in the same spot. So the only thing that we're moving here is the middle finger from that G note. We're moving it down directly below where the index finger is. So we have the index and middle like that, and then we have these 2 fingers up there where they were. Now like I mentioned, if you play an E minor chord like this, just those 2 notes, you can do that, or you can do it like this as well. But again, that's quite a bit of movement. You're going from here to here, you're moving all 4 of your fingers. But it does give a slightly different sound, so if you prefer the sound of the E minor chord versus the E minor 7 chord, that's fine. You can decide which way you want to play that. Now that chord's going to have 2 bars as well, and then we're going to move to a D chord, and that's just going to be a regular D major chord like this. Now again, if you were playing from that E minor 7 chord, then your ring finger gets to stay in that same spot. So again, that's another advantage. And then after that D chord, we're going to go to a C chord. Now this one, again, I recommend going to a C add 9. Now a C add 9 chord looks exactly the same as that G major chord that I showed you, but the index and middle finger are just 1 string down each. Now again, if you want to, you could play a traditional C major chord like this. But But again, that's a lot of movement, and that's a tricky chord, especially if you're a beginner, to get all your fingers into the right position there. So by playing a C add 9, we have our D major chord, and then to go to a C add 9, all we're doing is moving our index and middle finger again. We're leaving that ring finger where it was, and then we're just plugging in that pinky finger again. Now this C chord only has one bar that we're going to play, so it's different than the other chords. And then we're moving back up to a G chord again for one bar. So that's the entire verse. We're starting with G for 2 bars, E minor for 2 bars, D for 2, C for 1, and G for 1. Now let's look at the strumming pattern that we would use for this song. It'll be the same throughout the entire song, verses, choruses, and the bridge. So if you're a brand new beginner, you could just strum through this song using all down strums and counting to 4 for each bar. So you'd be doing that like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you would switch to that E minor. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The D chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's C. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then G. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to make that a little bit more like the original and sound a little bit more interesting, we're going to add in some upstrokes. So what we're going to end up with is this. So that's down, 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 up, down, up. Down, 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 up, down, up. So if we were to count that, that becomes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. And to make that sound even a little bit more country, a little bit more like the original one from John Denver, a good idea is to try and hit the bass note, so the lowest note of the chord first, and then strum through the rest of the strings. So that first down is going to be just on that low string, and then the next ones are going to be on all the strings. So that would sound like this. And that leads us to the chorus of the song. The chorus is basically 2 parts. The first half of the chorus is going to be G for 2 bars, D for 2 bars, E minor for 2 bars, and C for 2 bars. So that's going to sound like this. The second half is going to be very similar, but we're going to leave out the E minor chord. So that's going to be G for 2 bars, D for 2 bars, C for 2 bars, and then G for 2 bars. So that second half of the chorus would sound like this. And again, if you print off that PDF chord chart from the website, it'll make things a lot easier for you to follow along with these chord changes. Now this leads us to the bridge section of the song. And this is going to start with an E minor chord, but we're only playing that for 1 bar. So just 1 time through that strumming pattern. And then that goes to a D chord for 1 bar. And then to G for 2 bars. And then C for 1 bar, G for 1 bar, and then D for 2 bars. Then the second half of the bridge, you start on that E minor again, 1 bar, and then it goes to an F chord. Now we haven't come across the F chord yet, and this is a tricky one, but I'm going to show you an alternative here. So if you know how to play a full F bar chord like this, then you can play that. Or if you play sort of the smaller version here like this, or maybe like this, you can do any of those variations. So the simplest one out of those ones that I just did would be this one, where you have your ring finger on the 3rd fret here of the D string, your middle finger 1 string down and back a fret, and then your index finger on the 1st fret of the B string. Now if you play those and you keep this high E string open, that gives you an F major 7 chord. If you flatten down your index finger a little bit just to mute out that high string, then you'd end up with this. Just a regular F chord. Now if that's still too hard for you to play that F chord, I'll show you another cheater version that you can do. Now for this one, I would recommend before going to the F, when you go to that E minor chord, the easiest transition here would actually be to play E minor like this with these 2 fingers, your middle finger and your ring finger. Because this F chord that I'm going to show you, what we're going to do is move those 2 fingers up to the next fret, and then we're going to put our index finger, the next string down, 1 fret back. And that's going to give us an F major chord. Now these next 2 strings, this B string, you don't want as part of this chord. And so again, you can use your index finger just to lay a little bit flat on that to keep it from ringing. But the high E string, you can either let it ring or not. If it does ring out, then that gives you that F major 7. Or if you again kind of lay your index finger a little bit flat again, you can mute that out and just get those 3 notes. After that F chord, we go to a C chord. Now there's a couple of different options for this as well, and it sort of depends on which version of that F chord you're going to use. If you're going to use this full bar chord F, or you're going to use the smaller version of the F, then the easiest way to do this would be to go to a traditional C major chord, because from this position, all you're going to do is raise your ring finger up and your middle finger up, and that gives you the traditional C major chord, leaving that index finger in that same spot. So from F to C major, that's a fairly easy change. Now if you're playing that cheater F that I just showed you, like this, then it makes sense to go to the C add 9, because our middle finger is already in position. So again, you can decide what works best for you out of those different ways. Now we play that C chord for 1 bar, then we go to a G chord for 1 bar. And that's followed by a D. Now we're playing this one for 2 bars. And now we're going to go to a D7 for 2 bars. Now a D7 is kind of like a reverse D chord. Instead of playing this ring finger here, we need the note that's directly behind on that same string. So to do that, we're going to put our middle finger where the index finger was, and our ring finger where our middle finger just was. And then we're going to use our index finger to play that first note on the B string. And that's played for 2 bars, but on the second bar, he kind of holds that note, and then that leads back into the chorus. So that would be like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that leads back to the chorus. So let's play through the full bridge section. The hardest part about this song is that bridge section, so make sure you just take your time, try some of those different chord variations and figure out what works best for you. But even if you can't get that bridge section, make sure you know how to play the verses and the choruses, because those are really the most memorable parts, and those are the parts that people are going to want to sing along with. Now, if you want to learn more easy beginner songs, then check out this video that's on your screen now. And don't forget to download the free PDF chord chart of this song from the website. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.